Hey there, welcome to Judges chapter 4. I apologize for my lack of a video blog last week. I was at a pastor's retreat for most of the week, and so I didn't get an opportunity to do as much in-depth study as I normally put into these, so I thought it would be adequate to. So welcome back. A couple of quick points here. There's two different Jabins in the Old Testament. There's Jabin of Hazor, which is listed in Joshua 11 verses 1 to 15. That's actually not the same Jabin that we're talking about in this account. It very well could have been kind of a lineage name, which if I think of guys like Donald Trump, who are kind of full of themselves and have kids named Donald Trump the first, Donald Trump the second, Donald Trump the third, that sort of thing. So I know a whole bunch of Marks, and we can't associate one with the other as having the same story because they're two different people just with the same name. Same kind of idea here. It's interesting in this chapter that Jabin seems to be very blurred with Sisera. Sisera, more like Sistera.
Consider the fate of your women.
Clearly, you don't know our women. I might as well have marched them up here, judging by what I've seen.
The commander of the army, because Jabin has really nothing to do with the battle itself, which is kind of uncommon for a king. Most kings are involved with the battle, if not in the battle themselves, and so for the issues of war to not be taken, it would indicate that Jabin wasn't necessarily the king of the Canaanites, but the king of the section of Canaanites that was there. And Sisera might have been a free-range guy who had just a whole lot of people in his army, and a common enemy would be the Hebrews. So that would make sense, because it's not a nation of Canaanites that was wiped out in one fell swoop here. It was a small section. That small section was actually called Mount Tabor. And why is Mount Tabor important for the Israelites? Well, at the time, the location of Mount Tabor was fantastic. It oversaw the chief trade routes for the Canaanite settlements. And by taking it, the Israelites would basically cut off the supply to the other remaining Canaanite settlements in the area. It's important to note that Mount Tabor has a number of other items in history. In 1125, which is this circumstance, it was sacked, but again it was sacked once more in 735 BCE. Of course, it was actually ransacked so heavily that there was about 3 feet of ash that the archaeologists found at the site. So it's pretty interesting that this is a very common and essential point to taking that area for not only for the 12 tribes and their economic viability, but also to again cut off the leg to stand on that the Canaanites needed in order to have supplies brought to them. A few characters in this. Who was Deborah? Deborah was a woman who served under Israel. Served for Israel as a judge. She sat under a palm tree, which was kind of an interesting thought here. And the idea is either she lived under the palm tree or she simply just spent a lot of time there. I start to think about what it was like for her to just sit underneath a palm tree and have people come to her, and she was considered to be both a prophetess and a judge. So when she was judging, for example, she would deliver someone from a particular problem, like a little Philistine or Canaanite problem. So I sort of think about this one time when I was a kid. I may have said something wrong to this dude named Sean. He was this massive guy, well, as far as I was concerned, just a big kid with red hair and freckles. That's all I remember about him. But I remember saying something that ticked him off. And he started to chase me, and that's why I'm a long-distance runner, I'm quite convinced today, is because I got good at running. Anyway, so when I was running from this particular bully, I guess you could call him, I found on my way back to my house, I found a block parent. And so I got into that. I was able to make it into that house before Sean saw me go in, and he gave up looking for me. And so I think about Deborah, and I think about how she was kind of maybe a block parent to some of these issues that the Hebrew people were having. Anyway, back to a little bit about her and her relationship to Barak. For Barak to come to ask her for help would indicate that he considered her wise for counsel and also her abilities as a judge. So it's important to note that. We'll get into that a little bit more just in a moment here. But a quick tidbit of information that she was actually considered to be the grandmother or great-grandmother, we're not really sure, of Tobit. And Tobit was wrote, of course, the apocryphal book, the Book of Tobit. So it's not just a clever name. Anyway, so it's interesting to think that that this was her. One of her descendants wrote a book of the Bible. Anyway, so when Barak comes to ask her for help in Judges chapter 4 here, her response was evident that the honor would go to God. And because Barak came to her for this, and she kind of almost warns him about it. And Barak was okay with this. This indicates his desire to do the will of God and not seek his own honor. And that's really important because I akin it to kind of a pastor, a person who comes to a pastor and wants to do a sermon or become a pastor in their own right, but refuses to do the training to do so. And they turn away because they don't want to do the work to get to do the work that's involved and the commitment to get the credit of being a spiritual leader. So this shows a spiritual maturity that of Barak, that the honor, he doesn't really care about the honor being his. What he cares about is that the Israelites are freed from this, freed and able to take over the section of Mount Tabor from Sisera and Jabin. So it's pretty important that we note this because his heart is in the right place. Anyway. So Barak then goes to Kadesh. This is actually the same location, another tidbit of information, the same location where Jonathan Maccabees defeats the Syrian army. And you can read that in, again, another apocryphal book, and I don't know why we've got so many relationships to that in this study. But anyway, you can read that in 1 Maccabees 11, verse 63. Anyway, so he gets 10,000 men. But even 10,000 men, you look at the number that Barak and Deborah and the Israelites were against, being 400 iron chariots. And you wonder, well, 10,000 men against 400 men, surely they can take the day quite simply. Well, the iron chariots were these war machines of a great significance. What happens is the horses that run them have spikes in their shoulders. The wheels, like you see in a lot of these soapbox derby racer movies, have spikes coming out of the wheel, and it chews up the other soapbox derby racers. So you can imagine that the carnage that would come on the battlefield of having a chariot chase coming at you at full tilt with these spikes coming out the side being 4 and 5 feet long, the carnage would be absolutely unbearable. But Deborah here assures Barak that the Lord has gone out before him. Josephus writes, and again, this isn't a biblical account, but Josephus is a very reliable account that we can take here. But he wrote that that God went before Barak in this way, that there was hail and wind that beat the faces of the army, of Sisera's army. So I think about what it's like when I was a kid. There was a specific Saskatchewan winter that I recall specifically where the wind was pounding so hard as I was walking to the bus that I had to actually walk at an 80-degree angle for fear of being pushed over. And you're kind of like a ninja, you know. You got your head is wrapped everywhere you possibly can, except for the little slits of your eyes, and it's in that you kind of, and I also had, you know, glasses, so it helped quite a bit. And so I look at this and I think about how if the Lord goes up before the army and He pounds that wind and that hail on these chariots, for them to ride blindly into that would be, well, it'd be suicide. And so for the Israelites on the other side coming down the hill, for one, which, the gravity helps them, but it also was interesting that that with the wind at your back, it almost, if you've ever had a strong backwind, it almost lifts you off the ground a little. And in doing so, it gives you more momentum with your sprinting, and that is how the playing field between 10,000 men and 400 iron chariots, the playing field is balanced. So it's pretty incredible. Anyway, so then comes the story of Sisera. Up until this point, he was kind of a non-event. He's mentioned that he's the commander of the army, but Sisera ditches his chariot, and actually he's referenced in Psalm 83, verse 9 to 10, and it kind of reminds me of a joke.